introduction, and thank you for whoever's still for hanging around. Appreciate you being here. Well, first of all, I want to thank Monica and Eric and Fjord for inviting me to speak and giving me the opportunity to tell you about some of this work that we've been doing. Regarding my title, you can see it's quite long. Actually, it used to be longer when I submitted it, but I was asked to shorten it. So the only thing that's missing at the end is in solid tumors. So as it will soon become clear, I'm talking about a drug delivery in solid tumors and how we can try to modulate the tumor microenvironment. And it's been for improving drug delivery, and it's been something that I've been working on in part over the many years of my non-illustrious academic career. One other thing I want to say, I was going to introduce the other speakers who are still here behind me. Rang and Han doing some very cool stuff. Costas, as you saw, some cool stuff. So I'm going to be sticking to more mechanistic work, less kind of image-guided stuff. I have a couple of image-guided slides, but other than that, I'm going to stick to more of the mechanistic work. And I'm going to start with this slide here. So this is a slide. This is a relatively simple, straightforward study that was carried out in collaboration with Graham Woodward's group, who was presented yesterday, and also with Anthony King, who works with him at the Neurosurgical department at the University of Maryland. Makes these really cool nanoparticles, and we'll be seeing some for this brain work and some later on for the other tumor work. So this project was carried out in these ex vivo brain slices. They were freshly harvested, kept in those chilled artificial CSF, as you're supposed to do. And we used a non-focused, low-energy ultrasound device similar to the ones that are used in physical therapy. And basically, we were able to show that by giving these treatments to brain slices, that we could expand not only the extracellular space, and we'll be hearing that word a lot over the course of my talk, but also the perivascular space. For those of you who are not familiar with the space is adjacent to the individual blood vessels. We did some image processing. We were able to show that we can indeed significantly enhance or expand these regions. We also did some standard histology, petrosolium, to show that we weren't destroying the tissue using a positive control for kind of over-robust treatment. We also then, in a parallel set of slices, we injected these nanoparticle probes. These are coated probes with polyethylene glycol, so they don't stick to the extracellular matrix, and instead they're only restricted by in terms of their size. And this technique, this technique basically tracks them with something known as multiple particle tracking. It determines this metric known as mean square displacement, or MSD. And basically, this is a surrogate for the diffusivity or the kind of diffusion and movement of the particles. It allows you to compare things like particle size and also the medium that you're working with, as in our case. And so we're able to show, again, when we pre-treat with these low-energy ultrasound exposures, that we can significantly enhance the MSD values for both 100, 200, and even remarkably 500 nanometer nanoparticles in the tissue. Now, of course, we were interested in seeing if we could also do this in vivo. For this, we used an MR-guided focused ultrasound system, and I won't get into too many details about it because you've heard quite a bit over the last couple of days. This system allows you to again treat with very accurate image guidance. We treated a relatively large region in and around the striatum. And then we injected our nanoparticle probes, similar probes, and this time we did it by convection enhanced delivery. I need to mention that these pulse focused ultrasound or PFUS exposures that I'm going to be calling them over the next 5 or 10 minutes are essentially very different than the ones that are used for opening the blood-brain barrier. The ones that were developed by my group over a number of years, they're relatively high in acoustic pressure, typically 5 times greater than those used for opening the blood-brain barrier. We don't use microbubbles. And also, we're not targeting the vasculature. We're actually targeting the parenchyma directly, and we're trying to generate effects, as you saw earlier, for those brain slices. Now, looking at the results, first of all, for Evans blue dye, which is a relatively small molecule, we see a greater volume of distribution. And basically, we sectioned and we looked at all the particles over the entire brains, determined the volume of distribution. No real difference. Apparently, because the molecule is so small, it doesn't really need any help from the ultrasound. With the nanoparticles, we found, as you'd expect, a decrease in the overall volume of distribution as you went to a larger nanoparticle size. But in each case, we found a significant increase, again, in the volume distribution when we pre-treated the brains to our PFUS exposures. And I just want to mention that we weren't looking to, optimize and get, large region of distribution. We basically needed to titrate the amount that we're putting in there into the brain so that we were able to make a quantitative comparison. So these exposures that we were using in the brains were actually developed in my lab when I was at the NIH years before coming to the University of Maryland, and we did a lot of experiments in the muscle. The muscle is more uniform, easier to treat, of course, and we were able to show, again, in a non-destructive manner, we could not only open up the spaces between the individual muscle fiber bundles, but also the tissue remodels back to its original state over a period of about 2 to 3 days. And we also injected probes into the muscle after treatment. We gave a cocktail in this particular experiment of fluorescent albumin and nanoparticles. The albumin, again, is a small molecule. It basically shows you the convective front. These are in vivo images that were captured with a multispectral in vivo imaging system. Much better distribution, but no real difference, again, with our PFUS exposures. With the nanoparticles, on the other hand, they normally are restricted to the needle tract, but here you can see we're actually getting the nanoparticles kind of moving away from the needle tract through these gaps created in the muscle. And if you look now at this, these representative cryosections, you can see quite nicely again. Normally stuck in the region of the needle tract, we get really nice distribution through these gaps that are generated in the muscle. Now we did a lot of mechanistic studies, and I could spend the whole day just talking about this slide, and I'm not going to. Basically, we found we proposed a mechanism based on what's known as an acoustic radiation force. It's generated to a transfer of momentum from the ultrasound wave to the medium. This creates a localized displacement. It generates a very steep gradient of displacement on the side of the focal zone. And we found actually that the strain that's generated by these forces from these displacements actually peaks just off axis, a few millimeters on the edge of the focal zone between the region that's being displaced and that's not being displaced. So this is where the strain is being generated with each individual pulse. And basically, we proposed a mechanism that with each pulse that we give and the repetitive strains that are created, that we're actually working on the relatively weak points in the tissue, in this case being the interface between the cells or the other structures. And as a result, this is gradually expanding the extracellular space. And again, this is being done in a non-destructive manner. Now, of course, we wanted to see if we could also use this for a therapeutic purpose. We did a bunch of studies in different tumor models. I'm going to show you a few of those. In this one here, we actually injected plasmid DNA encoding for TNF-alpha. It's a very potent cytokine. We found that compared to the TNF-alpha on its own, we got significantly slower tumor growth when we pre-treated with our PFUS exposures. Actually, in the data we published, the study was still calling them high-intensity focused ultrasound. If you now look at some representative tumors, and I apologize for that they don't look very nice, but they kind of exemplify what we found. Not only were the ones that just received TNF-alpha approximately twice the size as we saw in the growth data, but compared to some partial hemorrhage in the upper region of the needle tract, we got a much deeper and broader region of necrosis with the PFUS and some pitting at the surface. And we assumed that this was happening, again, because we're getting better penetration and distribution of our agent. This was validated when we then injected, we then injected fluorescent nanoparticles again. We led fluorescent nanoparticles. And again, we found that they're normally restricted to the needle tract. These are whole tumors that were cut open. And you can see with the PFUS, we're actually getting much better distribution and penetration into the tumors. And again, we did some electron microscopy, which we love to do. And you can see now, again, these regions in the extracellular space that are expanded, a little more heterogeneous than you saw before, because again, these are solid tumors. And these were not present in the untreated controls. And we're also interested in seeing if we could also do this with systemically administered agents. We're not sure what we were going to get. So in this study, we actually treated a different tumor model, and we then injected these fluorescently labeled monoclonal antibodies with FITC, and we found that we were not only getting better penetration at the surface of the tumors, but also in the more central region. And this was shown with image processing, looking at the FITC signals. We also labeled the vessels, the vasculature with fluorescent lectin in red. We found that we're also getting better penetration moving away from the individual blood vessels after this agent had extravasated. Now, the results that I showed you for the TNF alpha were kind of pretty straightforward, right? We saw we were creating these structural effects, expanding the extracellular space. The agents are getting better penetration and distribution, and as a result, we got a better therapeutic effect. Now, here, we switched the FITC to ETM90. Now, we also got, an improved therapeutic effect, slower tumor growth, and as a result, better survival. But the question now was, again, straightforward effect for the direct injection. However, why were we getting better delivery with our systemic administrations in this particular study when it always showed earlier was we're just creating effects at the level of the extracellular space? And that essentially was the topic of my, or the title of my talk. Why, by creating these types of effects, are we getting better systemic delivery? In order to answer that, we need to take a closer look at the tumor microenvironment. Been well described in regards to its barriers for uniform and adequate drug delivery. On one hand, you have fibrillar collagen, which can prevent the movement of agents when injected directly into the tissue, and also when they extravasate. This is especially true for large agents such as viral vectors and nanocarriers. In this study here by Rakesh Chain's group, they showed quite nicely that when they co-inject these oncolytic viruses that are fluorescently labeled with collagenase compared to the injections alone, these are these tumors growing in these dorsal skin chambers, they of course get much better distribution because they're degrading the collagen. We carried out a very simple experiment in collagen gels. We grew them we made the collagen one at a physiological concentration, and we found that when we treated them at a single location and then immersed them in these particles, they only get taken up in the treated region. Even a day later, they really haven't moved away from that region, indicating that we aren't able to create some kind of mechanical effects to affect the collagen. Now, the other factor is high interstitial fluid pressure. This occurs as a result of a lack of functional lymphatics combined with leaky and immature blood vessels. This can create very high interstitial fluid pressures, typically with a very steep gradient as you go from the periphery of the tumor towards the center. And in some cases, the interstitial fluid pressure can be as high almost as the microvascular pressure. And of course, that's very bad if you want to deliver things systemically. Typically, large agents require convection in order to extravasate into the perivascular space. So we did a number of studies to kind of investigate the potential effects of our exposures on the IFP. In this first study, we infused directly into the tumors, and we measured in real time with an inline pressure probe. We were very interested in the baseline pressures that we got when the pump was on. We then turned the pump on, let the pressure rise to reach the plateau, and then let the pressure return back down to these levels. And at these upper levels, what we knew was happening here is that the system is essentially in a state of equilibrium, and that the flow that was being pumped into the tumors was actually equal to the flow going out, and hence these plateaus. So looking at the results of these studies, first of all, for these baseline pressures, we see that these are lower, consistently lower in the PFUS treated tumors. And essentially, we got the same thing at these upper plateaus, again, where the system was in equilibrium when the pump was on. Now, this kind of data can be analyzed using something known as Darcy's law, which shows the relationship between pressure and flow for a system with a characteristic hydraulic conductivity. And without actually looking at these values that we were getting here, we can very simply say that because we're working with constant flow rates, the lower pressures that we're getting are somehow telling us that we have increased the hydraulic conductivity of the tissue. Another experiment we did was using something known as acoustic radiation force impulse imaging, or ARFI. Basically, this is a type of remote elastography that uses these high-frequency pulses, where you're able to not only determine the maximal displacement that you're getting in the tissue, but you can also look at the rate at which the tissue returns back after you've given those pulses. And that's what we were interested in. It basically reflects the elasticity of the tissue. So in this experiment, we measured a number of times over the surface of the tumors with ARFI. We treated with our PFUS exposure. We did the measurements again. And then we were able to see that in each of the tumors that we did this, that after giving our exposures, we found a significant decrease again in the rate at which the tissue was relaxing back to its initial state. Now, in the absence of any whole-scale damage being produced in the tissue, which we know doesn't occur, the only way to explain these results is that we had somehow reduced the amount of fluid in the tumor. You can just imagine a balloon that's filled very tightly with water. You press it, it kind of bounces back right away. You remove some of the water, and the kind of bounce back is not nearly as quick. Now, this is the last experiment that I'm going to be telling you about. This is something actually that's been done by my student, Lee, who's in the back somewhere. Oh, there. So this is an experiment that's kind of culminating all the stuff that we've done up until now. Here we're using the classic method known as the wick and needle method to measure the interstitial fluid pressure within the tumors. We used 2 sets of 10 tumors, very closely matched in size with very low overall variability, which is very important. And then we measured the pressure from the edge of the tumor all the way through to the center and then all the way through to the other side. So one of the first things we found was that in the center, which is where the pressure is higher, we got a 30% decrease in the interstitial fluid pressure for average for all 10 tumors. And if we now look at all the average data for all the tumors as we move from one edge to the other, we find not only do we get a much less steeper curve going from the periphery to the center, but we also get a lot less variability, which is also an important factor when it comes to the tumor microenvironment. Now, in a parallel set of tumors, we treated them the same way, same sizes, same number of tumors. We're actually still collecting and processing the data now. We injected these fluorescently labeled nanoparticles. And first of all, we found overall approximately a 60% increase in the number of particles getting into the tumors, as indicated by the fluorescent signals. And more interestingly, we also segmented the tumors at 1/4 diameter intervals. And if you look at the trend that we're seeing now here with our results, again, as we continue to collect them, we're getting relatively less particles in the periphery of the tumors with our PFUS exposures and relatively more in the more central regions. Now, this kind of data can be analyzed in a more abstract manner. But first of all, I want to mention that this is the first time that we've actually had data where we're directly quantitatively comparing the two. Up until now, we've collected all this data anecdotally. We've shown better delivery, better penetration, reduction in IFP, increase in hydraulic conductivity. Now we actually have a true data set where we, in the same tumors or the same sets of tumors, that we can actually compare the IFP with the delivery of these agents. If you look at it in a more abstract manner, you can see that essentially what we're trying to do is flatten the curve for the IFP, and as a result, get better and more uniform delivery across the tumors with our delivery of our agents. Ultimately, the goal is essentially to flatten the curve so that your tissue is behaving more like normal tissue, and again, you're getting more uniform delivery across your tumors. This is essentially kind of in parallel with what they're trying to do or already started doing with Avastin, where they're using it to normalize the vasculature, and as a result, also lower the IFP. All right, so just quickly to summarize these results and explain what we think is the mechanism for generating these effects. So first of all, this we know we're creating this repetitive focal mechanical movement in the tissue. This is generating localized strains. And because we're working with a heterogeneous medium comprised of cells and extracellular matrix, this is creating structural alterations like expansion of the ECS, as we saw, and disruption of collagen. This is increasing the effective pore size of the tissue, allowing for better penetration and distribution of our agents and improved therapeutic effect. This, of course, pertains specifically to the direct injections either into the tumors or the muscle. Now, because we're working with the tumor microenvironment, these effects here can also increase the hydraulic conductivity of the tissue, which increases or improves the interconnectivity within the tumor microenvironment. It allows for improved flow from regions of high pressure found in the core of the tumors to the periphery where the pressure is lower. It also allows essentially a better reabsorption or increased reabsorption of fluid through more functional vessels, also found in greater abundance in the periphery. This lowers the overall IFP and further contributes to increasing the delivery in terms of increased extravasation for systemic deliveries and also penetration of the administered agents. Again, both extravasating and also injected directly. I'm just going to tell you one more thing before I finish my talk, and that's in terms of what we're pursuing as far as a clinical translation for this type of procedure. We've been looking very seriously for treating head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, including talking with medical oncologists and head and neck surgeons. We see head and neck as a candidate for a number of reasons. For one, these tumors, because of the intricate anatomy in and around the head and neck region, they're not amenable to complete dissection or ablation by focused ultrasound or other modalities. They're also, for the most part, accessible for treatment with a focused ultrasound, approximately 70% or more, depending, based on where they are located. And also, these tumors suffer from very poor drug delivery, where if someone presents with a primary head and neck tumor, they're typically treated with a concurrent chemo radiation therapy, where cisplatin is generally the drug of dose, but it also has very severe dose-limiting toxicity. So we've already shown using our nanoparticles that we can eliminate for now this type of toxicity. You can see it here. This is free drug. These are the cisplatin and the nanoparticles, and we continue to collect this data. We're up to 2 weeks, again, no toxicity. We've also shown that we can enhance the delivery of these nanoparticles. As you saw earlier, this is a different experiment. We're getting about 30 to 40% more of these nanoparticles than the particles on their own with our exposures. We've also shown that if we load these particles with cisplatin compared to free drug, we're getting more than a 3-fold increase with these particles alone, and then more than a 4-fold increase if we first treat with our focused ultrasound exposure. We're also looking into using targeted nanoparticles with the FN14 receptor, which is overexpressed in many solid tumors, including head and neck tumors. And lastly, we're also looking at using the cisplatin-resistant tumor models that are generated by essentially exposing them in vitro. And one of the cool things about these tumors is not only are they have a higher IC50, but they also overexpress the FN14 receptor for potentially better drug delivery. All right, so that's it. Before I finish, of course, I want to acknowledge everyone who contributed to the work I presented today. A lot of the work was my time at the NIH Clinical Center in the radiology department. Some of this data was generated by graduate student who I co-mentored with Desmond Zderich from George Washington University. And of course, all of my colleagues at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and especially Ali, who's sitting here, who's got a fantastic job on a lot of these projects. Of course, thank you for your attention.